In 1859, the United States and the British Empire, two of the most powerful nations on Earth, came within a hair of all-out war. The cause? A pig, eating some potatoes. This is the story of how a hungry pig nearly started a war between two empires, and how one sensible man stopped it. Let's dig in. Our story takes place on San Juan Island, a small, beautiful patch of land off the Pacific coast between what is now Washington State and Canada. The problem was, in 1859, nobody could agree on who actually owned it. Both the United States and Britain were absolutely certain it was theirs. And it was all because of some very sloppy wording in a treaty. Quill loves a good bit of sloppy wording. Back in 1846, Britain and America had signed the Oregon Treaty to split the Pacific Northwest between them. The border would run along the 49th parallel, then out through the middle of the channel. Simple enough, except there wasn't one channel, there were two, and San Juan Island sat right in between them. The Americans said the border ran through the western channel, which put the island on their side. The British said it ran through the eastern channel, which put it on theirs. So both countries just moved in. The British got there first. The Hudson's Bay Company, a giant British fur trading firm, set up a sheep farm on the island called Bellevue. Running it was a proper, orderly Irishman named Charles Griffin, and among his animals was a large, free-roaming black boar with a big appetite. Then came the Americans. As US settlers poured west, a handful crossed over to San Juan Island and started claiming plots of land, right on top of the British farm. One of them was a farmer named Lyman Cutler, who built a little cabin and planted himself a nice patch of potatoes, right next to Griffin's land. So now you've got an American farmer, a British farm, an unclear border, and one very hungry pig. Quill can already see where this is going. On June 15, 1859, Lyman Cutler walked out to his garden and found Griffin's big black pig happily rooting through his potatoes again. This wasn't the first time. The pig had a real taste for American potatoes, and Cutler had had enough. In a fit of anger, Cutler grabbed his gun, took aim, and shot the pig. And with that single shot, he very nearly started a war. Now, Cutler actually felt a bit bad about it, so he went over to Griffin to apologize and offer to pay. This is where it should have ended. It did not. Cutler offered $10 for the pig. Griffin, insulted, demanded $100 for a pig. That's about $3,000 today. Cutler was outraged. He argued the pig had been trespassing, so it was Griffin's fault. Griffin argued Cutler should have kept his potatoes away from the pig. The argument got heated, and then Griffin made it much bigger. He reported Cutler to the British authorities on the mainland. British officials threatened to arrest Cutler and haul him off to the mainland to stand trial, and that threat lit the fuse. Because to the American settlers, this was outrageous. A British official arresting an American on land the Americans believed was theirs? Absolutely not. The settlers sent an urgent plea to the American military for protection, and the American military was more than happy to help. The plea landed on the desk of General William Harney, a hot-headed American commander who really did not like the British. Harney saw a golden opportunity to grab the island for good, so he sent troops. Specifically, he sent this man. Captain George Pickett. Yes, that Pickett, who a few years later would lead the famous doomed charge at Gettysburg. But today, he's here to defend a potato patch. Quill enjoys this crossover. On July 27th, Pickett landed on San Juan Island with 66 American soldiers and set up camp, planting the American flag firmly in the ground. His orders were bold: resist any British attempt to land or to arrest American citizens. In other words, stand your ground against the British Empire. With 66 men, the British were not amused. The governor of the nearby colony, James Douglas, was furious that the Americans had put soldiers on British soil. Douglas ordered British warships to sail to the island and put a stop to it, and the British had a lot more than 66 men. The first British warship arrived and anchored right off the island. It was called the Tribune, and it carried 31 guns. More followed. Soon there were 3 British warships, then 5, carrying over 2,000 men and around 70 guns, all aimed at Pickett's tiny camp. On one side, 66 Americans and a potato grudge; on the other, 2,000 Britons, 5 warships and 70 cannons. This was, mathematically, a disaster. Quill is sweating. The British commander on the scene had clear orders too, but they left room for judgment, and thank goodness they did. Because the American side kept doubling down. General Harney sent Pickett reinforcements, bringing the American force up to hundreds of men, with their own cannons dug in on the hill. Honey Spectre, Stern keeps. Both sides were now dug in, loaded, and staring at each other across a few hundred yards of grass. One nervous trigger finger could set off a war between 2 empires. My sector should be in Killian. And here's the truly remarkable part. Over the following weeks of this armed standoff, not a single shot was fired between them. In fact, the British sailors reportedly tried to goad the Americans into firing first, shouting insults across the water. The Americans, wisely, did not take the bait. The reason no one fired came down to one man on the British side who simply refused to be an idiot. His name was Rear Admiral Robert Baines, the top British naval commander in the Pacific. When Governor Douglas ordered him to land Marines and drive the Americans off, Baines flatly refused. Baines reportedly said he would not involve 2 great nations in a war over a squabble about a pig, which might be the single most sensible sentence in military history. Quill would like that framed. So the British warships held their fire and simply waited. Meanwhile, word of the standoff was racing across the continent to the 2 capitals, and both governments were horrified. Because here's the thing, neither Washington nor London had ordered any of this. As far as the President and the British government were concerned, 2 great powers were about to go to war, and no one at the top had a clue why. When the news reached President James Buchanan in Washington, he was alarmed. The last thing America wanted was a war with the British Empire over a pig. So Buchanan sent his most senior, most respected general all the way across the country to calm everything down. Enter the legend himself, General Winfield Scott. Scott was a national hero and a master of diffusing exactly this kind of mess. He took one look at the situation and basically said, "Everyone, calm down." Scott negotiated a brilliant compromise. Instead of fighting over the island, both sides would peacefully share it, each keeping a small military camp there until the border could be sorted out properly. And so began one of the strangest occupations in history. For the next 12 years, British Royal Marines and American soldiers lived on the same little island, side by side. And here's the best part. With no war to fight, the 2 enemy camps got bored and became friends. They visited each other, threw parties, held picnics, and competed in sports. Quill loves this so much. For over a decade, the Pig War was less a war and more the world's longest, most heavily armed neighborly barbecue. Finally, in 1872, both countries agreed to let a neutral outsider settle the border once and for all. They chose a rather grand referee, Kaiser Wilhelm I of Germany. A commission appointed by the Kaiser studied the treaty, looked at those two channels, and ruled in favor of the Americans. San Juan Island was theirs. The British peacefully packed up their camp and sailed away. No battle, no bloodshed, no hard feelings, just a quiet, friendly end to a 12-year standoff. The British peacefully packed up their camp and sailed away. No battle, no bloodshed, no hard feelings, just a quiet, friendly end to a 12-year standoff. In 1859, the United States and the British Empire, two of the most powerful nations on Earth, came within a hair of all-out war. The cause? A pig, eating some potatoes.